Have you ever wondered what makes for a compelling, timeless story? For a narrative to be so powerful and memorable that it remains relevant even as decades pass and culture changes? Usually when we mention such standards, our mind wanders to examples from traditional forms of storytelling. Books, paintings, movies, songs, or even video games. But the beauty of storytelling is its versatility, which can be conveyed through any and all mediums. Because at its core, it's all about communicating a narrative to an audience. And it can be something as simple as a 3.5-minute video package, showing the years-long feud of two rivals as they compete for the most important prize in their industry on the grandest stage of them all. That's all that's needed to immortalize a story. 3.5 minutes. Before we actually get into how a wrestling promo became a staple of an entire industry and an ever-present reference in our culture, we need to understand 3 things about what makes for a compelling story within the world of wrestling.
Who are these two guys? Why are they fighting? And why should I care?
And here's the thing. If we're going to answer those questions, we need to put our 90s hat on. Because the late 90s wasn't just another decade. It was a whole vibe. Skateboard culture was everywhere, nu metal and grunge were blasting out of every car stereo, the internet was crawling its way into homes, video games were suddenly bigger than ever, and this anti-establishment screw the system energy was in the air, bleeding right into the early 2000s. And nowhere was that energy louder than in professional wrestling.
If you smell what the Rock is cooking.
Dwayne Douglas Johnson made his in-ring debut in the WWE on November 17, 1996 as Rocky Maivia. He was presented to the crowd as a babyface, or good guy for the non-wrestling folks out there, with all the bells and whistles of an outdated hero to go with it. He was smiling all the time, working hard, and wrestling clean. He was coming from a deep heritage of wrestling, and much was expected of him. But this good guy persona he was introduced with was immediately ill-received by the audience. You see, the mid to late 90s were a turning point in the entertainment culture and wrestling itself. Fans had grown sick and tired of the clean-cut good guys, and unfortunately for Rocky Maivia, his character was caught in the cycle. So WWE creative and The Rock pivoted, realizing that success in this decade no longer rested in stories about traditional good and bad guys. WWE's main rival that decade, WCW, knew this and were ahead of the game. They understood there was a changing sentiment in the culture, particularly in the younger male demographic, and tapped into it by relying heavily on morally questionable babyfaces to lead the way in the fight against heels who upped the ante on what it meant to be a bad guy. The benchmark for creating this new breed of villain in the 90s was set 4 months before Rocky Maivia ever stepped foot in the ring. Hulk Hogan, perhaps the most famous and recognized wrestler of all time, had been a good guy for decades. In 1994, he joined WCW in the same vein, still coming out with his iconic red and yellow outfit, still telling the audience to take their vitamins and say their prayers. But it just wasn't working like it used to. Fans had grown tired of the same shtick, and they began to reject his clean, all-American persona as it had admittedly run its course. This all changed in July 1996, when Hulk Hogan walked out to the ring and aligned with the villainous NWO, shattering the minds of wrestling fans everywhere. It seemed that in the 90s, anyone could end up becoming a bad guy. But WCW didn't stop there. They had to find the right person to match up against the new villainous Hogan, and so they turned to another traditional good guy in Sting, who was constantly booked against the biggest heels in WCW. But even Sting was changed to fit the new cultural trends. Gone was the colorful surfer gimmick, and in came the morally ambiguous Crow persona, based on the 1994 film of the same name. Crow Sting had the black and white face paint and hardly spoke, instead shifting his actions to match one of an anti-hero, exactly like that of his movie namesake. The point in all of this is that WCW took two clean baby faces, or good guys, and repositioned them through the lens of the 90s. In Hulk Hogan, the hero turned to villainy because the status quo he helped establish had turned on him. In Sting, the hero turned to this anti-hero vigilante persona, in response to the WCW landscape plunging into chaos due to the presence of Hulk Hogan joining the NWO. So with the combination of WCW's popularity surging and Hulk Hogan's renaissance, WWE had their own crisis of confidence. So they decided to slowly tweak their product over the mid-90s and start what is known as the Attitude Era. And it may be why they let Dwayne Johnson walk out to the ring in August 1997, surrounded by chants of "Die Rocky Die," and deliver his first promo as a heel, throwing back at the audience the vitriol that was aimed at him for almost a year. And so The Rock was born. He was cocky and brash, and though fans loved to hate him, he received huge backlash from the audience when he eventually teamed up with Vince McMahon as the so-called corporate champion, solidifying his role at the top thanks to the proverbial suits. So, we have our villain. Now, let's go get ourselves someone for him to dance with. Stone Cold had been making the rounds in the wrestling world for years in WCW and ECW, but the late 90s catapulted him into superstardom with the WWF. The persona of the foul-mouthed anti-hero that would become a cultural icon for decades to come was crystallized in his famous 1996 King of the Ring promo, where he taunted his born-again Christian opponent Jake the Snake Roberts. As he stomped up to the mic, he shouted the now infamous lines,
Talk about your Psalms, talk about John 3:16. Austin 3:16 says I just whipped your ass.
He not only dropped what was considered an expletive at the time, but he did so in a sacrilegious context, pushing the boundaries of what could be aired through television at the time. Much of the love that Stone Cold received from there on was largely a consequence of this anti-establishment screw your boss attitude that reflected a similar feeling in the culture at large. And it's no surprise that you can find bits and pieces of his character in some of the seminal pieces of the time. His rejection of authority and the world around him is mirrored in the hero's journey from the Matrix. Both he and Neo end up challenging the status quo by working outside the bounds of the rules. For Neo, it's a bit more extravagant and metaphysical, but the ideas are the same. Neo stops bullets, Stone Cold brings out a beer truck to tackle the suits that keeps everyone in check. His anger and frustration spoke to the same audience that Tyler Durden spoke to in Fight Club. While Stone Cold didn't cut promos to highlight the hypocrisy of the consumerist culture, his character was an embodiment of pent-up frustrations that audiences could relate to. He brought to life their anger with a brawling style approach, often getting into the face of opponents and giving them the business both physically and verbally. He was their rage, their rebellion, their middle finger to authority personified. And just like Tyler Durden, when words weren't enough, he turned to violence, not just for the fight, but for the meaning that came with it. And it wasn't just the dramas and action films of the time that tied Stone Cold to the zeitgeist of the 90s. Dark comedies like Office Space conveyed the bubbling white-collar resentment of the 9-to-5 job and the punishing loss of individuality that seemed to be enacted by middle management in the process. There is no character that better represented this resentment toward the boss more than Stone Cold Steve Austin, whose biggest rivalry was with the literal CEO of WWE at the time, Vince McMahon. Did WWE creatives sit there and look at the media landscape to pick apart these traits and mold them into a character? Maybe, but it genuinely felt like Stone Cold Steve Austin was an organic creation, at the heart of which was a guy named Stephen James Anderson, who was perceptive enough about his audience and culture to listen to what made them tick. This ability to look within the heart and soul of 90s WWE fans made him a hero in their eyes. He was, ironically enough, the true people's champion. Emblematic of the fight the everyday Joe had against the loathsome 9-to-5 and tiresome boss. So we have our two characters. Why are they fighting, and why should we care? In the world of WWE storylines, Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock had been at odds with one another for quite a while by the late 90s. Their rivalry had taken its first major step at WrestleMania 15 in 1999. The storyline was steeped in late 90s vibes. The Rock was the corporate champion, backed by the evil boss Vince McMahon, and he was set to take on the beloved Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had been fighting against all sorts of chicanery and double dealings to get what was rightfully his, a shot at the WWF Championship. Stone Cold would go on to win the title and remain the hero for months to come. However, their paths would cross again 2 years later. But this time, the story was a little bit different. The two had grown substantially in the previous years, not only within the wrestling world, but within the entertainment space as well. The Rock even hosted SNL back in March 2000. With their popularity surging and the two wrestlers hitting their strides, they grew past their previous characterizations. The Rock was no longer the corporate champion, and Stone Cold was much more than Vince's arch-nemesis. It meant that this time, the fight for the title wasn't being built with the usual narrative focus in mind. Instead, the WWE could lean on their stars' sheer popularity and generate a feud around legacy and being the best. And there was nowhere else to settle such a debate but WrestleMania one more time. We've been mentioning the word WrestleMania quite a few times now. For the uninitiated, it sounds like a fun word, but for us wrestling fans, it's the Super Bowl, World Cup Final, and World Series all wrapped up in one. It's where the biggest storylines of the previous year culminate. An event where the best matches happen, and where some of the most significant moments in the company's history occur.
Look at this! He's out of there! Oh my God! Look at this! Oh! Look out here! Look out! Get squeezed! Look out!
Its allure and spectacle has reached the same stratosphere as the previously mentioned sporting events. The production, the celebrities, the atmosphere, the bright lights, the passionate fan base. It's an event that boosts cities' economies, brings friend groups together, and has you dreading the wait time of finding out what's next while you're in awe of what had just transpired. And so for The Rock and Austin, their second date with Destiny would be at WrestleMania 17 on April 1st, 2001 in Houston, Texas. We've spent the last 15 minutes or so hyping up this match at WrestleMania 17, giving you the backdrop of how these guys got there. But you also can't just have these guys step out into the ring after a months-long feud and years of animosity and just fight. You need to prep the audience and condense their anticipation into a bite-sized piece of media that can excite all those who are watching along. You need the appetizer before the entree comes out. For WWE, these main storylines get the promo treatment. A video package is aired prior to the match, recapping the story at hand with highlights of weekly segments edited together with a song to deliver the hype that the main event needs before it kicks off. What fans were treated to leading up to the night of WrestleMania 17 was the best 217 seconds of wrestling promo ever put to screen. One of the most important things a promo should do is draw the audience in. It needs to solidify the attention of those who are watching. The My Way promo, as it has come to be called, wastes no time in doing just that. Right from the jump, it sets the stage in a way that even casual fans can follow, pulling you straight into the story. Within the first 20 seconds, we see Stone Cold win the Royal Rumble and the right to headline WrestleMania. And then, The Rock wins his championship match, and it's announced that he'll be in the main event as well. In less than half a minute, the stakes are made crystal clear. The match is set, the collision course is locked in, and you immediately understand just how important this all feels. And while it's usually the stars themselves that hook us from the start, it's the presentation that keeps us locked in. In wrestling, that means commentary. And nobody embodied that better than Jim Ross, the very first voice you hear in the promo. Sure, anyone could stand there and say it's The Rock versus Stone Cold in the main event of WrestleMania live in front of 60,000 people at the Astrodome. But when Jim Ross says it, you don't just hear the words, you feel them. Because the cadence, the raw emotion, the delivery, he makes it sound larger than life. Like it's destiny that The Rock and Stone Cold were born for this exact moment. That they were put on this earth to eventually meet in a sport that very few are meant to be in and succeed. The second reason behind the promo's longevity and replay value, and arguably the most important, is the music. The world of wrestling, especially in the mid-90s to the mid-2000s, was synonymous with rock and nu metal music. It was the perfect match. A combat sport with music that had elements of metal, hip-hop, and grunge. It was music that your parents didn't want you listening to, combined with television they didn't want you watching. This was when Linkin Park, Korn, Slipknot, and of course Limp Bizkit made their way into the ears and minds of young teens all over the world. The official theme song for WrestleMania 17 was My Way by Limp Bizkit, which also happens to be Limp Bizkit's best song, in my opinion, of course. And while it is the theme for Mania 17, it's primarily remembered as the Rock vs. Austin promo song. As the video starts, the song is immediately heard. The mid-tempo chord progression in the beginning, along with the scratching of Check Out My Melody over Stone Cold winning the Royal Rumble and The Rock winning the championship match at the previous event, creates a level of build-up and anticipation from the very start. The music generates an additional layer of hype to the promo, which in turn hooks the audience right away. The song cuts off once it gets to the part involving Steve Austin's wife, which we'll ignore here and pretend it doesn't exist, resuming with Stone Cold delivering his signature move, the Stunner, to The Rock. And it's that moment right there. It's that moment when My Way resumes playing and you hear the guitar riff and it's just chills. It's absolute chills. You legit want to run through a brick wall as you watch it. From there, the song intensifies in pace and aggression, syncing images of the two stars clashing with one another in the build-up to their match, hitting each other with their finishing moves, stealing each other's finishing moves, and just full-on brawling in the middle of the ring with an absurd amount of beer as well. The lyrics of the song, which offer messages and themes of individuality, rebelliousness, and conflict, aligns with the feud between the two as they battle it out for supremacy to see who the main star of the WWF is, as they will both do anything they can in their own way to achieve that. But it's 2025. Why does this 25-year-old nu metal song matter? What about it helps immortalize this promo? Well, for starters, the song is a banger, let's not get it twisted. No matter what you think of Limp Bizkit or the nu metal genre in general, My Way is an absolute bop. This connection we have with it is further intensified when you think about how rooted the genre is to that era. So anytime you hear anything nu metal, particularly something as good as My Way, you can't help but be transported back to a much simpler time in life. We didn't have much to worry about, and all we wanted to do was come home from school or the park and watch wrestling. A time when all we needed was junk food, a box-shaped TV, and our friends. The song is very much a product of the early 2000s, where we didn't have to care, nor did we want to, and hitting the play button on My Way takes you right back. And of course, the other big reason for this promo's resurgence, like most things in our digital life, is its place in meme culture. I mean, you guys see it on Twitter. Anytime there's a rivalry, whether it's in sports, music, or even politicians going at each other, this video pops up. The promo has effectively become a placeholder for any major rivalry that's recently made its way into the mainstream. That alone just proves its staying power in the minds of people. It's like the go-to visual for showing off any type of conflict between two people at almost any scale. In a way, this promo has gained a new life in the 2020s. Its original purpose was to preview a WrestleMania main event, but since then it has gained this second life as an entertainment artifact, both as a callback to the Attitude Era and to the musical and cultural context of the time. And that's the nostalgia factor at play here. The Attitude Era was a beloved time in professional wrestling that so many fans yearn for, and if there's something that's used to identify that time with, it's this promo. WrestleMania 17, and to a greater extent that main event between The Rock and Austin, brought an unofficial end to that period in the WWE. as it moved on from its edgy, crude programming to something a bit more palatable for the mid-2000s. But thankfully, with the popularity of Twitter and TikTok, this promo has been kept alive in the minds of fans, new and old alike. The younger generation of fans who aren't familiar with wrestling's history can come across it and find themselves digging into the past of WWE and ask, who are these guys? Why are they fighting? And why should I care? So is this all a bit too much? Are we dragging just how important 217 seconds can be? Are we simply just blinded by nostalgia? Maybe. But when we talked about the things that we love about storytelling, the characters, their motivation, the build-up, the emotional attachment, the use of music, all of it, it's all here, in a short video package from 2001 that was made to promote the main event of a wrestling event. It wasn't aiming to be something that would be talked about over 20 years later. All it did was tell a story about the two biggest characters in the company by being unapologetically rooted in its time. The Rock vs. Stone Cold Steve Austin WrestleMania 17 promo isn't just a hype video that only diehard wrestling fans love. It's a representation of a time and place gone by, both in the squared circle and in the cultural context at large. Call it whatever you want. Art, entertainment, nostalgia. It doesn't change the fact that it creates a feeling you're chasing from a time that doesn't exist anymore. And that's something that only the best stories can do.